We're all set? Yep, you're good. Well, this is a annual tradition, it seems. It's a tradition. And we're very happy that, Mark, you've decided to join us again. It always feels like December in New York when we're able to spend 30 minutes with President Emmert. This is your session. Please ask questions. It's your opportunity to ask President Emmert questions. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
I always love that panel. What's your takeaway from listening to those student athletes?
Well, I'm just sitting there thinking, can we just sort of bottle them up and take them on the road? You know, they were wonderfully frank.
Yep.
They were honest. They recognized the things that need to be changed, and it's sort of a to-do list for the NCAA they came up with.
What was the one takeaway of things to be changed? Like if you put a mental note for yourself, what surprised you?
Well, nothing surprised me at all because I travel the country. I meet with student athletes. I hear a lot of the same stories wherever I go. I'm always stunned by their level of success, across the board, and their ability to squeeze in so much into the time that they have. If there were a way to expand the day, it would be a fabulous thing to do. Mostly what I hear from students, all three divisions, by the way, is they, as you heard from them, they book their whole day, hour for hour.
Can't believe it.
I always say, well, if you had another hour, would you spend it on academics? Would you spend it on sport? Would you spend it, on your social life? Most of them want an hour to catch their breath. Just can I be a student for an hour and they don't necessarily want to work any harder on their sport. They never want to take an hour away from their sport because it's so competitive. But it'd be wonderful to find a way to just back down on the demands on them, but they're really competitive go-getters and they just keep charging.
We are going to touch on a number of issues. First one, name, image, and likeness. We went out to the marketplace, got some questions from some student athletes. I believe we have our first one ready to roll. So if we could bring that up, this is a question for President Emmert.
Hi, my name is Sinclair Miramontes, and I'm from Nebraska Soccer. My question for you, President Emmert, is with all of the buzz going on around name, image, likeness, how do you foresee this impacting the non-revenue sports as well as any gender equity claims that may arise with it?
You.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think everybody in college sports is asking that same question right now because the issue is, and I thought the students, by the way, were wonderfully sophisticated in their approach to it. It's very complex. The association membership, the schools have been for the 10 years I've been involved now, consistently improving support for and providing greater opportunity to student athletes to where we've reached this place now where we're having this next debate about what beyond can be done there. The NCAA board, leadership of the association, I've been very clear that we need to do more. The real question, though, is, again, this is great to follow these students, is first of all, how do you make sure you do that in a way that does no damage to what already exists? There are those out there that are advocating not just the whole NIL issue, but that this ought to be about bigger, broader benefits. There are those that are advocating that this ought to be an employee-employer relationship even, and including some in Congress. So if you move in that direction, all of the leaders in the NCAA have said, we cannot go there. We go there, and her question becomes incredibly pertinent. If you're in an employee-employer relationship, Title IX doesn't have anything to do with that. That's about education. If you're in an employee-employer relationship, now you're working in employment law. Now schools are going to have to say, well, if I got to pay employees rather than have them be on scholarship, I'm not going to be able to afford all 16 sports. So which ones am I going to get rid of? Well, it's not going to be football and basketball. So where do you go to finance all that? So part of what we got to do as we work our way through this, we've got to find a way to not damage the incredible things that are happening. How do we make more opportunities? How do we provide greater access to things rather than subtract?
But is giving a student athlete some sort of compensation for name, image, and likeness equal to employee-employer relationship? Isn't there some balance you can have there where it isn't?
Well, I sure hope so, because if there's, and that's the debate we've got to have right now. If there isn't, if you had a completely unfettered sponsorship model, like some state bills are anticipating, the nature of that could very quickly slide into an employee-employer relationship. If you have schools, for example, helping line up the car dealership for $100,000, and they're working with an agent of a 17-year-old because that's where some of these laws anticipate, and the school is the one organizing. I'm making up these numbers, of course, but $100,000 sponsorship in order to recruit a kid. Well, it's pretty hard in a legal environment to describe that as anything other than an employee-employer relationship. Now, where does that leave us? So one of the great challenges here is how can you, in a current legal environment, create a model that provides benefits of all types above and beyond those tethered to education that doesn't immediately trigger professionalization.
Why can't, with Val and Gene Smith and the committee, once you decide on that, proactively go to Congress? You've got Chris Murphy looking to file legislation. Be ahead of the game and say, this is our ask of Congress across all 50 states. Well, could you do that?
Yeah, sure, we can. And
is that the plan?
Well, we have to.
Right.
You simply can't have a model where you've got 20, 30, however many states all having different rules. You can't run a national system in that fashion. Everybody recognizes that. Here in New York, there's a bill pending that would, in general strokes, take 15% of the gate and put it in a fund for student athletes. That's certainly a pay-for-play model.
You don't want,
right? And so if you've got one state doing that, another having a different set of rules, they're all talking about different ways to allocate those resources. You cannot run a national athletic model that way. So the only solution to some of those things, of course, is to try and find a national one, and that's Congress.
It doesn't seem that too many people are on your side, with all due respect, in terms of the NCAA side. Like, raise your hand if you think NIL in some form should be, moved through for 2021. Okay, well, this audience understands the complexity of it. But outside of, in Congress, there's not that many people who are really fighting, saying that, wait, no, we're not going to go down this path. It seems like you're a little bit on the defensive here. Do you wish you could have gotten ahead of it, say, in 2016, 17, and 18?
Well, first of all, I disagree that we're on the defensive on it. Indeed, last November, our board said, yeah, we really do need to find out a way to do this. Secondly, you heard some of the students talking about, well, I wish we could come up with a model that allows us to do more things like the regular student body around social media and a variety of other things. In the national office, we've been processing waivers on those for 2 years now, more than 2 years. And more than a couple hundred kids now have been able to take advantage of that so that they can do things around, like they were chatting about some student who had created a business in high school. And
I
don't know the details of that, but I suspect had somebody applied for a waiver for that, it would have been approved. And so we've been working on it diligently, but you always have to recognize when you say the NCAA, you're talking about 1,100 universities and colleges. We operate under a representative decision-making process. I know that's slow and painful, drives me crazy sometimes, drives everybody crazy sometimes, but nobody that I've talked to wants to turn it over to a governmental entity. So if the schools are going to maintain their autonomy and authority over college sports, which I feel strongly is essential to college sports, then we're going to have a representative decision-making approach. And that's, almost by definition, a little slower than we'd all like it to be sometimes, certainly slower than I'd like it to be.
And this is what you're hearing from your presidents and chancellors and your board in terms of the approach you're taking. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
There's no question in my mind. Nothing's 100%, of course, but there's no question in my mind that the vast majority of universities understand that we need to move into a period where we're modernizing our rules. They're ready and able to do it. We've got to be able to modernize our rules consistent with the legal environment that we live in. We have for 10 years been constantly cranking up in very appropriate ways that I'm proud of the opportunities and benefits that student athletes are getting. On a number of those occasions, we've been met by a plaintiff's bar that sued us and said, well, no, you can't be doing that. So now we're at a place where how can we look at new opportunities without immediately provoking another onslaught of lawsuits or moving student athletes into an employee-employer relationship with schools. That's what everybody's concerned about, and it's a challenging issue, but the fact that it's challenging doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. and doesn't mean we're not working hard on it.
Real quick for the audience, timetable that you anticipate. Dan Wolken asked Commissioner Bowlesby about 2021. What are you looking at in terms of timetable?
Well, through a normal NCAA decision-making process in Division I, the first time anything could be triggered and in place is about this time next year for January 21, probably somewhere around that timeline. That's challenged because we may well have states passing state laws that go into effect as soon as this summer. So we'll have to figure out how to deal with that. I've spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. lately, and the members of Congress and the Senate that I've chatted with, the leadership in those houses understands that this is a very serious issue and that you can't do it state by state.
Real quick, because the audience has a couple of them here, President Emmer. If you have to make waivers and you keep mentioning waivers, isn't that an indication that rules need to change?
Yes.
So the waiver rules are ones that you have to work through to change those
Yes.
rules to allow.
Yes. Whoever's question that is, the answer is yes.
Are you afraid that professional associations, this has been written about, might unionize athletes and create group licensing rights and group likeness?
No. They have to be employees to be unionized. You have 50 states. The NLRB and a number of federal courts have ruled that there's simply no way to unionize individual students who are employees of public universities across 50 different sets of labor laws. Some schools are in private institutions. If they were employees of private institutions, they're covered under the NLRB. If they're employees of a public university, they're covered under state labor laws. You'd have to do it state by state and pretty much association by association. So, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that because you have to move toward an employee model to get there. I'm really, really hopeful that when people pause and look at what it really means to have student athletes be employees rather than students, they will realize that that ends college sports as we know it.
And are you continuing to create a system in your mind, President Emmer, of haves and have-nots?
Well, when you say you, I mean, I don't mean me.
No, not you.
Would rule changes that are envisioned, for example, by unfettered sponsorship arrangements for students, would that exacerbate the have and have-nots? Absolutely. I can't imagine it not. And there might be different haves and have-nots based upon your geography and your alumni base, because if the competition for recruitment, and bear in mind, one of the many distinctions of college sports is we recruit athletes. The Olympics, everybody wants to compare to the Olympics. They don't recruit. They look at your passport. We recruit. And so schools that could put together the most attractive sponsorship deals are going to go out and recruit kids based on the best Chevy dealership they can get, and that will of course have a profound impact on where students go.
I'm sure we're going to have this thread throughout, but if you were to say your priorities for 2020, what are two priorities of your administration in the next 12 months?
I have one, and that's dealing with this issue.
Just dealing with this issue. So how much of your time right now is spent in Washington dealing with NIL?
Well, spending on the issue itself, 75%. We still have to run everything else that we do, and we're going to make sure we run 90 great championships and do all the day jobs of the NCAA. We processed almost 250,000 applicants through the Eligibility Center this year. We got to run all the governance. So we got all of that stuff going on, but this one is at least 3/4 of my time and attention.
Do you find that people like Gavin Newsom and state legislators and governors, do they understand the issues?
They're starting to, and it's incumbent on everybody in college sports to make sure that they help communicate that issue. The voice of the NCAA is important in all of this, but nobody graduated from the NCAA. Nobody graduated from the Big Ten. They graduated from a school, and they're alumni of a school and institution, and congressmen and congresswomen and senators care about the schools in their state, and they want to hear from them. And so when I walk into a senator's office and I've got a university president on my arm, that's a much more powerful conversation. So we're doing that, and we're going to continue to do it. But this is not just the NCAA's issue, because people find that this amorphous, ambiguous entity. It's easy to say, well, we're not in favor of the NCAA, but I love the University of Michigan, and I love California, and I love.
So you feel, Mark, that you're making progress in getting that message out to elected leaders?
Yes, but we've got a long way to go.
Got it.
Politics in America are very, very complicated, and there's people with lots of complex motivations.
Other issues I want to hit on, because this is going quick. Last year, you and I were here, you said one of your focuses areas was esports. NCAA decided not to really go forward with esports. What was the thinking behind that?
Wanted to wait and see how it matures a little bit more. We're still very attentive to it. The board and our ADs and presidents are all saying, yeah, this is really consequential, but we're still not quite sure how it fits.
What are they not sure about?
What does this belong inside an athletic department? Does it not? Is this really a part of what we want to fit into the intercollegiate athletic model?
Got it. We have another video question from a student, so if we could cue that up for President Emmer, we should be ready to go.
Hi, I'm Maya Neal, a soccer and track and field student athlete at the University of Tennessee. A question we had to ask you is, what do you think the most important area that the NCAA can improve upon is in the next 3 to 5 years?
Area we should most improve upon in the next 3 to 5 years. Let's say outside.
I like the student athlete piece. That's good. Well, let's set aside the whole benefits and NIL issue for just a minute. I heard from the student athletes a number of things around health and wellness.
Yeah, shocked me.
Clearly, we've been spending a lot of time on that, and we need to do more. We need to work more with our campuses. The mental health issue is gigantic across all of the student bodies, but our student athletes is, of course, our concern. So we need to figure out more and more that we can do there. Obviously, we've got work to do to continue to address issues around sexual misconduct. It's an issue that we can't leave alone. It's very complicated and it's hard, but we need to be attentive to it. And then we got to make sure that we constantly protect this model that works so well for so many kids.
And in those instances of mental health, sexual misconduct, are those institutional responsibilities, are they conference responsibilities, or a membership organization like the NCAA?
Yeah, all three. This is a federated system. There's parts of the policy that the schools can put together at the national level through the association. Conferences have a role to play in all of that, and then obviously it all hits the road at the campus level. And that, that's the biggest challenge is that highly decentralized approach.
I'm surprised last year we were here, gambling was more of a hot topic. A year in, the concern was college athletes are potentially the most vulnerable.
Yep.
Okay, and also with the proliferation of states adding legalized gambling, did that make you concerned? A year in, Mark, where are you in terms of gambling and its role in intercollegiate athletics?
Well, we're all at the conference level, at the institutional level, at the national level, learning a lot about how this is really going to roll out and operate. We still are trying to gain some federal regulatory scheme around it. That's hard in this political environment. We've had some positive impact on a number of states and the way they've framed their rules. Still deeply concerned about prop betting and in-venue betting and what that can bring. We've learned a lot and have had a lot of success working with the integrity systems around working with Sport Radar and Genius Sports and others to put in place integrity systems. That seems to be working pretty darn well. But you go to sleep every night waiting to see what's in the news the next morning because it's a very, very challenging issue.
Well, you could have an issue like the Cardinals recently did in the NFL of a player.
Absolutely.
Right. And then,
and we have 19,000 teams.
Right.
It's not just the big games that get bet on.
We were here hearing from Commissioner Swafford and Kevin White. Basketball season, state of college basketball right now, health of the game in your mind is on a 0 to 10 scale. 0 meaning in trouble, 10 meaning fully healthy and vibrant is?
I think it's 8, 9, somewhere up there. It can always get better and more exciting. The game's fabulous. The participation's great. I was over in the Garden last night.
Right.
Saw some great basketball. The attention everybody's giving it is fantastic. Yes, it's got a lot of issues, and we need to continue to work on those. But the nature of the game itself and the quality of that game is going very, very well.
And conversations with the NBA in terms of the one and done rule. I know it's mainly an NBA and NBPA issue, really.
Yeah, it's completely there. We don't have anything other than expressing our views. We can't get involved in their contract. I don't want to speak for Adam. I spent a bunch of time with them yesterday. They're clearly interested in continuing to move forward. We keep talking about, and I feel profoundly that one of the most important issues around this includes thinking about whether student athletes should be employees or not. There needs to be clear choice. If someone wants to be a professional athlete, they should have that opportunity. And if they can go do that, they should do that. The fact that coming this year, there are going to be opportunities for a student athlete at 18 to make $135,000 in the G League. That's a good thing. I'm all in favor of that. We've got the XFL and football now, and they're saying, sure, we'll take kids at an earlier age. young men and women and their parents ought to be able to say, I want to go to college and have this experience, or I want to go play professional ball and have that experience. And the more we can support our professional colleagues in providing that pathway, the better off we are.
A couple quick hitters as we finish up time. Mark, a message if you're in front of a room of presidents, chancellors, and athletic directors, and you want to send a message about controlling cost of coaching salaries and also the arms race on facilities, what do you tell them? In a free market, what do you tell them?
Yeah, I've been one of those, so I've been on both sides of that conversation. I think they're an extremely difficult place. They want to be successful in sports. They want to provide their students with the best possible experience they can get. I think they have to, presidents and chancellors in particular, have to be engaged in some of that decision-making process more than they are often. I love all the ADs in the room, but they often are insufficiently attentive to what some of those choices are being made in some places, and they need to stay on top of it and make sure that the dollars are being spent in the right place. Do we really need a gold-plated locker room? Is that the best place to put it? Or can we, as we heard from those students, or do we want to first and foremost make sure we got enough mental health counselors? And I know that gold-plated locker rooms attract students. God knows I've spent money on them, but you got to make sure you're doing it right.
Percentage of presidents that are actively engaged with their athletics are?
Highly variable by division. Division threes are less so, which is surprising because some cases 30-40% of their students are athletes. At the D1 level, I think most presidents are highly engaged right now because it's such a high-profile issue for them.
Let me flip it. Percentage of presidents that are highly engaged and should be because they understand it are?
Being a
That's a tough question.
It's a tough question. Being a university president is one of the hardest jobs in America. You're basically running a small city. You've got constituencies coming at you from every possible angle. Athletics is maybe, at Washington it was 2% of my budget, but 90% of what people paid attention to, 2% of my student body, but a high profile 2%, and you still wind up having to do everything else. So it's hard to find the right balance.
That's a fair point. We have Jim Delaney coming up at 1:30. His legacy as he departs and leaves the Big Ten is what?
Massive. He's had a profound positive impact in college sports. He's got really great values around intercollegiate athletics. He's led the way on a whole bunch of really important issues.
You've been in this job now for 10 years,
I'm in my 10th
2010.
year.
You're
I'm
in
in
your
my
10th
10th year. Yeah, amazing.
What are you better at now than when you started?
I like to believe everything. But that might,
What was the hardest part?
That might tell you about where I started. But
No, I mean, it's a tough gig. I don't envy you, man. It's a hard job. But I mean, the biggest learning and the biggest thing you've changed over the last decade in your role is?
learning how to pay attention to the people on their campuses and understand what the issues on the various campuses are. I came at this with 30 years of experience on campuses, but it was a fairly narrow set of campuses. Big 12, SEC, at UConn and Colorado. And so I knew a pretty good slice of it. I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did. Learning that, understanding that, figuring out the decision-making process in this very complex entity, being a little more patient.
You wanted to move too fast at times?
Faster than the organization can move.
Can the organization move any faster? Because it's been a theme this morning of just how slow and deliberate a membership organization is.
It can on some things, and we've gotten a lot better at it. And I'm constantly, doing that. I mean, the irony is that we get scolded by various components of society when we move slowly, and then we also get scolded when we move fast.
Yeah.
And so, really what it winds up is people want a decision that they want, and when the decision's different, well, then it was too slow or it was too fast.
You are known to be easily criticized. The organization, not you personally, but the
me
NCAA is easy to criticize.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But-
because, again, nobody graduated from the NCAA. I remind my staff all of the time that we get criticized on the regulatory role. Not much criticism on the tournament side, on the championship side, right?
That's true.
So when we play the role of a referee in a lot of cases, nobody cheers when the refs run onto the court. Nobody cheers when they run off the court. The only time they say anything to them is to boo them. And they almost never say, nice game, when they trot off. But everybody in the arena knows you can't have the game without the ref there. So we kind of play that role, and nobody should ever expect people to stand up and say, yay, the NCAA is just fabulous.
It's not going to happen. You're used to that.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you go around the halls of
It's like Congress. I mean, when's the last time somebody said, "Yay,
No,
go
you're
Congress"?
absolutely right. And so you, like you said, you're kind of well adjusted to that and know the role and focus on what you can focus on. So when you go around the halls of Indianapolis and you tell your staff and you tell your colleagues, let's do this better. Let's really focus on doing this better.
Yeah.
What's the mantra?
Well, we do it all the time. It's first and foremost, pay attention to what's going on with our kids, with the student athletes. You know, and when we see things that the world may or may not pay attention to, graduation rates tick up. That's cause for celebration in my office. When we have, you know, fewer regulatory issues, that's cause for celebration. When we have more resources flowing to student athletes, when we're dealing better with health and wellness issues, we pause and celebrate those things. And when our championships go well, we pause and celebrate that stuff. So we try to make sure that they understand. There's people at work in Indianapolis that they understand. They're helping create an environment where all these schools can provide those kind of opportunities to these young men and young women.
And in the last minute, I want to give you the opportunity to address this crowd, Mark, in terms of name, image, and likeness. One final thought, either what people may be missing, misunderstanding, or the misconception about it, and the message that you really want to get out for the next year is?
The association is more than happy to provide leadership in this arena. The member schools are appropriately anxious about it because it's complicated. They don't want to blow up the support that's out there now for nearly 500,000 kids. They want to keep that model intact. But we're ready, willing, and able to modernize the rules. We need to do it in a way, though, that is thoughtful and that is done carefully, because there's an enormous amount of unintended consequences that could come along with this. You were hearing that from those wonderful students you had up here.
Right. Well, always a good sport to come to New York, always a good sport to sit with us for 30 minutes, say the message of the NCAA for the next 12 months. I hope to see you next December. In the meantime, we are going to now break for lunch. Had a great morning. Thank you for all your great questions. Lunch is going to be one floor down. We'll come back here in about an hour for a great afternoon. We'll end with